The galaxy, vast and infinite, shimmered with the promise of unity. For centuries, stars had witnessed nothing but war fleets colliding in fiery chaos, colonies reduced to ash, and civilizations torn apart by greed and fear. Now, the Universal Accord promised something different: peace. 47 alien civilizations, each unique in their biology, culture, and ambitions, had come together to sign the treaty. Their fleets hovered like silent guardians above the sacred world of Zeratis, a planet of lush forests, crystalline oceans, and skies that pulsed with ancient light. At the heart of this historic gathering was Terra, Earth's representative civilization. Young, brash, and unpredictable, humanity had earned a reputation that rippled across the stars. They were the newcomers, the reckless species who had stumbled into interstellar politics with stolen technology and unrelenting ambition. For decades, the Galactic Council had dismissed Terra as little more than a nuisance, a primitive race playing with toys they didn't understand. But Terra had proven them wrong. Every attempt to suppress humanity had backfired spectacularly. Trade blockades only made them innovate faster. Political manipulation only strengthened their resolve. Military confrontations only revealed their ferocity. Terra didn't just survive, they thrived. And now, the Council had no choice but to invite them to the table. For most species, the invitation to the treaty signing would have been an honor. For Terra, it felt like a test. Commander Ethan Cade, a man forged in the fires of countless battles, knew better than to trust the Council's promises of peace. His dark eyes, hardened by years of war, scanned the invitation with suspicion. Zeratis, they said, was sacred ground, a place where no weapons would be drawn, where diplomacy would reign supreme. But Cade had seen the truth hidden behind the Council's polished words. Terra wasn't invited because they were respected. They were invited because they were feared. The Council didn't want peace, they wanted control. They wanted humanity to kneel. Cade's instincts screamed that this was a trap. He had seen too many accidents in the past: human mining colonies mysteriously wiped out, trade ships vanishing without a trace, diplomats assassinated mid-negotiation. The Council always denied involvement, claiming neutrality and innocence, but Terra knew better. As the Vanguard prepared to depart for Zeratis, Cade stood on the observation deck of his ship, staring out at the endless void of space. The stars seemed quieter than usual, as if holding their breath. Behind him, his crew worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and efficient. Captain Lyra Vance, his second-in-command, approached, her voice steady but laced with concern. "They are calling this the beginning of a new era," she said softly. "Do you believe that?" Cade didn't turn to face her. His gaze remained fixed on the stars. "I believe they want us gone," he replied. "And if we show weakness, they'll make sure we disappear." Vance didn't argue. She knew the commander too well. He was a man who trusted actions, not words, a man who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and survived it. Down in the hangar, soldiers prepared for the mission. They moved like shadows, their faces grim, their weapons gleaming under the cold light. Terra wouldn't walk into the summit unarmed. They couldn't afford to. Zeratis loomed ahead, its beauty masking the danger hidden beneath. The forests stretched like emerald carpets over the land, their leaves shimmering with bioluminescent light. Rivers of liquid crystal wove through the terrain, reflecting the stars above. It was a world untouched by war, a place where peace seemed possible. But Cade knew better. Beneath the surface, the Council's claws were waiting. The treaty wasn't a promise, it was bait. Terra would come prepared, not for diplomacy, but for survival. As the Vanguard dropped out of warp, flanked by 5 massive dreadnoughts, Cade's voice echoed through the comms. "Remember why we're here," he said, his tone sharp and unyielding. "They don't respect us. They fear us. And fear makes people dangerous." The ship descended toward the delegation platform, its engines humming with restrained power. Terra had arrived, and the galaxy would never forget it. The treaty signing was set against the backdrop of the glimmering jewel that was Zeratis, a planet so revered that its name carried a weight of sacred diplomacy. Its surface shimmered with a hypnotic beauty, forests glowing faintly with emerald light, rivers of liquid crystal weaving through valleys, and skies that seemed alive with a pulse of ancient energy. But it wasn't the planet itself that held the galaxy's attention, it was the massive orbital station suspended above it, a structure of cold steel and shimmering alloys, where the fate of 47 civilizations would supposedly be decided. Terra's delegation didn't arrive quietly. The TSS Vanguard, humanity's flagship, emerged from hyperspace like a predator stalking its prey. Flanking it were 5 colossal dreadnoughts, their hulls dark and jagged, bristling with weaponry that seemed to challenge the very stars themselves. These weren't mere escorts, they were sentinels, silent warnings to anyone foolish enough to attempt betrayal. Terra had learned its lesson well, and this time, they came prepared. Inside the Vanguard, the air was thick with tension. Commander Ethan Cade stood at the helm, his presence commanding and unyielding. His dark uniform bore the scars of countless battles, each thread a reminder of humanity's struggle to survive in a galaxy that wanted them erased. His gaze was sharp, calculating, as he watched the orbital station grow larger in the viewport. Behind him, his team gathered, each member a reflection of Terra's resilience. Captain Lyra Vance, her expression cool and unreadable, stood with arms crossed. Her mind was a labyrinth of strategies, always 5 steps ahead, her icy demeanor masking the fire that burned within. Beside her loomed Colonel Dane Riker, a towering figure whose muscles seemed carved from stone. His presence was a warning in itself, a reminder that Terra didn't need words to make its point. And then there was Rear Admiral Cassian Ward, the tactical genius whose quiet confidence had turned the tide of more battles than anyone could count. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, a reminder that Terra didn't send diplomats, it sent warriors. As the Vanguard docked with the station, the delegation stepped onto the platform, their boots echoing against the polished metal floor. The air was cold, sterile, and heavy with unspoken tension. Alien diplomats lined the halls, their eyes fixed on the humans with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Among them was a serpentine alien from the Scyther species, its elongated body coiled elegantly, its scales shimmering like molten silver under the artificial light. Its slitted eyes narrowed as it hissed, "This is a peace summit, human. Leave your weapons at the door." Commander Cade didn't flinch. His voice, steady and sharp, cut through the air like a blade. "You invited us into your house. We just remembered what happened the last time." The words hung heavy in the room, a reminder of the betrayal Terra had endured 10 years ago. During another so-called peace summit, humanity's diplomats had stood before the galaxy, speaking of unity and cooperation. Mid-speech, plasma shots had erupted from hidden turrets, cutting them down in seconds. The footage was erased, the incident buried under layers of denial and lies. No alien was held accountable. No justice was served. But Terra never forgot. The alien diplomats hissed and muttered amongst themselves, their unease palpable. Many of them had hoped Terra would arrive meek and desperate, eager to prove itself worthy of the Council's approval. Instead, humanity had arrived armed and unyielding, their presence a defiance that couldn't be ignored. As the delegation moved deeper into the station, the architecture became more elaborate, its walls adorned with symbols of unity and peace. But to Terra, these symbols were hollow, mere decorations masking the truth. Every step they took was a reminder that this summit wasn't about peace, it was about control. Captain Vance leaned toward Cade, her voice low. "They are watching us closely," she said, her eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign of weakness. Cade's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Let them watch," he replied. "They'll see exactly why they are afraid of us." The tension in the air was almost suffocating, a silent battle of wills playing out between Terra and the rest of the galaxy. The humans walked with purpose, their movements sharp and deliberate, while the alien diplomats whispered and stared, their unease growing with every step. Terra had come to the summit not as victims, but as survivors. They carried the weight of their past betrayals, their scars a testament to their resilience. And as they reached the grand chamber where the treaty would be signed, one thing was clear: humanity wasn't here to beg for peace. They were here to ensure their survival, no matter the cost. The grand chamber was vast and imposing, its walls carved with intricate symbols of unity and peace, glowing faintly under the golden light of suspended orbs. Alien delegates filled the room, their forms strange and varied-scaled, feathered, armored, translucent, each species a testament to the galaxy's diversity. At the center stood the council's high speaker, a towering figure cloaked in shimmering robes that seemed to ripple like liquid starlight. His elongated face was serene, his voice deep and resonant as he began the ceremonial address. "Today, we stand on the threshold of a new era." The words reverberated through the chamber, but to Commander Ethan Cade, they were hollow. Standing with his team near the edge of the room, his posture was rigid, his eyes scanning every movement, every flicker of light. He didn't trust the grandeur, the promises, or the smiles of the alien diplomats. Terra had been burned before, and Cade wasn't about to let history repeat itself. Then, it happened. A faint pulse in his neural COMMA signal so subtle it could have been mistaken for routine diplomatic updates. But Cade recognized it instantly. The code was old, buried deep in Terra's archives, used only for one purpose: a kill switch. His jaw tightened. The ceremonial address continued, but Cade's focus shifted entirely. The signal wasn't just a warning, it was a countdown. "Abort," he whispered into his mic, his voice sharp and quiet. "Phase 3. Full lock and load." Before anyone could react, the chamber plunged into darkness. The golden light from the suspended orbs dimmed, replaced by the cold, flickering glow of emergency systems. The air shifted, heavy and electric, as hidden plasma turrets emerged from the rafters above, their barrels glowing with deadly energy. The first shot was deafening, a crack of searing plasma that tore through the air and struck the floor near Terra's delegation. The humans moved instantly, their instincts honed by years of survival. Alien diplomats scattered, their faces twisted into cruel smiles, sharp teeth glinting in the flickering light. The peace treaty was nothing but a facade, a carefully orchestrated trap designed to eliminate humanity once and for all. Cade's team sprang into action. Captain Lyra Vance was the first to move, her exorig humming to life as she slammed her hand against her wrist controls. A shield generator unfolded around her, its translucent barrier absorbing the plasma bolts raining down from above. The energy crackled and hissed as it met the shield, but Vance held firm, her expression cold and focused. Colonel Dane Riker let out a growl, his massive frame barreling forward like a living tank. His kinetic shotgun roared with each pull of the trigger, the blasts pulverizing alien guards who had rushed to block the exits. Blood and sparks flew, but Riker didn't stop, his movements relentless and brutal. At the Rear Admiral Cassian Ward was already in motion, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. He barked orders into his COMM, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Marine squads, counter-attack formation. Neutralize those drones." The automated drones, sleek and deadly, descended from hidden compartments in the walls, their weapons firing in synchronized bursts. Terra's Marines responded with precision, their rifles spitting controlled bursts of fire that shattered the drones mid-air. Sparks rained down like artificial stars, illuminating the chaos below. Cade himself was a blur of motion, his instincts driving him toward a hidden console embedded in the wall. Plasma bolts streaked past him, the heat singing the air, but he didn't falter. His fingers flew across the console, inputting a coded signal with practiced speed. The Vanguard received the signal instantly. High above the station, Terra's flagship roared to life. 6 orbital kinetic rods, massive tungsten projectiles capable of leveling entire cities, were released from their holding bays. Their descent towards Zeratis began, silent and unstoppable, their trajectories calculated with terrifying precision. Back in the chamber, the chaos reached its peak. Alien guards surged forward, their weapons gleaming, their faces twisted with cruel satisfaction. But Terra's delegation didn't waver. Captain Vance pushed her shield generator to its limits, the barrier shimmering as it absorbed blow after blow. Riker fought like a beast unleashed, his shotgun a blur of destruction. Ward's Marines held their ground, their movements sharp and coordinated, every shot finding its mark. Cade turned from the console, his voice cutting through the comms. Vanguard, confirm kinetic strike. Target the surface. Make them feel it. Alien diplomats screamed in protest, their voices shrill and desperate. The high speaker's comm facade shattered, his elongated face contorting in fury. You dare defile sacred ground, he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. Cade's response was cold, his words laced with iron. You dare to betray us. This is survival. The chamber shook as explosions erupted, the plasma turrets overloaded by Terra's counterattack. Smoke filled the air, mingling with the scent of scorched metal and blood. Alien bodies littered the floor, their cruel smiles replaced by lifeless stares. Above Zeratis, the kinetic rods pierced the planet's atmosphere, their descent unstoppable. The ground below trembled as the first projectile struck, its impact sending shockwaves that rippled across the lush, sacred surface. Forests burned, rivers boiled, and the skies darkened with ash. In the chamber, Cade stood amidst the chaos, his gaze unwavering. Terra hadn't come for peace, they had come for survival. And in the face of betrayal, humanity had shown the galaxy exactly what it meant to endure. The first kinetic rod struck with the fury of a vengeful god. Zeratis' military garrison, a sprawling fortress of gleaming towers and reinforced walls, was reduced to nothing in an instant. The projectile tore through the atmosphere like a blade, its descent silent until impact. The ground heaved violently, splitting open as if the planet itself cried out in agony. A deafening roar erupted, drowning out all other sounds as a column of fire and debris shot skyward, blotting out the light. Buildings crumbled into ash, their foundations shattered. The once pristine forests surrounding the garrison were consumed by flames, their emerald glow extinguished in the chaos. The shockwave rippled outward, reaching the summit dome 5 kilometers away. Inside, the air seemed to vibrate with the force of the explosion. Walls trembled, cracks spidering across the ornate carvings that adorned the chamber. Alien guards staggered, their balance lost as the floor beneath them quaked. The golden orbs of light flickered erratically, casting the scene in a surreal, stuttering glow. Terra's forces didn't hesitate. They moved like shadows in the chaos, their precision honed by years of battle. Rear Admiral Cassian Ward led his Marines toward the upper balconies, his voice sharp and commanding. Push forward. Clear the snipers. The balconies were a labyrinth of hidden alcoves and narrow walkways, designed for defense and ambush. Plasma turrets emerged from concealed panels, their barrels glowing as they fired bursts of searing energy. Ward's Marines responded with ruthless efficiency. Grenades arced through the air, detonating with sharp flashes that sent alien snipers tumbling from their perches. The turrets were neutralized one by one, their mechanisms sparking and sputtering as precision shots tore through their cores. Ward moved with purpose, his calm demeanor masking the storm of calculations raging in his mind. Every order he gave was a thread in a tapestry of Terra's counterattack, a tapestry woven with blood and fire. Below, Colonel Dane Riker was a force of nature. The lower levels of the dome were a maze of corridors and chambers, each filled with alien guards desperate to regroup. But Riker didn't give them the chance. His kinetic shotgun roared with every pull of the trigger, the blasts echoing like thunder in the confined spaces. Walls splintered, alien bodies crumpled, and the air filled with the acrid scent of scorched flesh and metal. Riker's movements were brutal, almost primal. He didn't dodge or weave, he charged straight through the chaos, his sheer presence enough to send enemies scrambling. His armor was streaked with blood and ash, a testament to the destruction he left in his wake. Alien guards tried to mount a defense, but their plasma rifles were no match for Riker's relentless assault. He was unstoppable, a living embodiment of Terra's wrath. In the midst of the chaos, Commander Ethan Cade pursued the Council's high speaker. The alien leader had fled the chamber moments after the first kinetic rod struck, his robes billowing as he disappeared into the labyrinthine corridors of the dome. But Cade was close behind, his pulse rifle steady in his grip. The corridors were lined with alien artifacts, relics of diplomacy and history. Ornate sculptures glowed faintly, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with ancient energy. But Cade didn't care for their beauty or significance. His pulse rifle spat bursts of energy, shattering the artifacts as he advanced. Shards of alien crystal rained down, their soft glow fading as they hit the ground. The high speaker's footsteps echoed ahead, frantic and uneven. Cade's heart pounded in his chest, his focus razor sharp. He wasn't here for diplomacy, he was here for survival. Every step he took was a reminder of Terra's betrayal, of the lives lost in the name of false peace. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a grand hall, its ceiling vaulted and adorned with shimmering murals of galactic unity. The high speaker stood at the far end, his elongated face twisted with fear and fury. "You are fools," he hissed, his voice echoing off the walls. "You will doom us all." Cade didn't respond. His pulse rifle fired, the shots tearing through the murals and striking the speaker's defensive shield. The alien stumbled backward, his robes scorched, his composure shattered. "You doomed yourselves," Cade said coldly, his voice cutting through the din. The high speaker raised his hands, desperate to summon reinforcements, but it was too late. Terra's forces had overtaken the dome, their precision and ferocity unmatched. The grand hall shook as another kinetic rod struck the planet, its impact sending tremors through the structure. Cade stepped forward, his pulse rifle aimed directly at the speaker. Behind him, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by the distant rumble of destruction. Terra had turned the tide, and the galaxy would never forget the price of betrayal. In that moment, Cade wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a reminder that Terra would endure, no matter the cost. The battle had ended, but the air inside the summit dome was thick with the weight of what had transpired. Smoke curled lazily in the fractured light filtering through the broken ceiling, mingling with the acrid scent of plasma burns and scorched flesh. Terra's forces moved cautiously now, their weapons still drawn, their eyes scanning every corner. Victory had come at a cost, but the silence that followed was far from peace. It was the kind of quiet that carried the whispers of something darker. Commander Ethan Cade stood at the edge of the central chamber, his gaze fixed on the entrance to the tunnels below. The floor had been torn apart during the battle, revealing a network of hidden passages that spiraled deep into Zeratis's core. At first glance, they looked like escape routes, narrow and winding, their walls lined with alien markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. But as Terra's forces descended, the truth began to unfold, and with it, a horror that silenced even the most battle-hardened soldiers. The tunnels were not escape routes, they were storage facilities. Rows upon rows of alien weapons lined the walls, their designs twisted and unnatural, as though they had been crafted by hands that understood only cruelty. Modified gene weapons hummed faintly, their cores pulsating with sickly green light. Nanobot shells set in neat rows, their surfaces glinting like polished obsidian, each one capable of erasing entire populations with microscopic precision. Biological experiments floated in containment tanks, their forms grotesque and unrecognizable, writhing weakly as though trapped in eternal suffering. Colonel Dane Riker led the way deeper into the tunnels, his shotgun slung across his back, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. The further they went, the darker the revelations became. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of chemicals and decay, until they reached a chamber that stopped them all in their tracks. The room was vast and sterile, its walls lined with glass pods that glowed faintly in the dim light. Inside the pods were human test subjects, men, women, and children abducted from Terra's colonies. Some were dissected, their bodies torn apart and preserved like specimens in a grotesque museum. Others were barely alive, their skin pale and translucent, their eyes hollow and unseeing. Machines whirred softly, monitoring their vitals, prolonging their suffering for reasons that none of Terra's soldiers could comprehend. Riker's breath caught in his throat as he stepped forward, his boots echoing softly against the cold, metal floor. His gaze fell on a pod near the center of the room, where an older man lay slumped against the glass, his skin scarred and pale, his body trembling weakly. Riker knelt beside the pod, his hand resting gently against the glass. The man's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused at first, but then he saw Riker. A faint smile tugged at his cracked lips, and his voice came as a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the machines. "You came." Riker's jaw tightened, his expression darkening as he reached for the control panel beside the pod. With a hiss, the glass slid open, and the man collapsed into Riker's arms, his frail body trembling violently. Riker handed him a sidearm, his voice cold and steady. "Point and shoot," he said, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. The man nodded weakly, his fingers wrapping around the weapon as though it were the only thing tethering him to reality. His eyes burned with a quiet rage, the kind that came from years of suffering and betrayal. Meanwhile, Cade stood in the center of the chamber, his gaze sweeping over the horrors surrounding him. His pulse rifle hung loosely at his side, his fingers twitching as he fought to contain the fury boiling inside him. This wasn't war, this was genocide. The treaty had never been about peace. It had been a calculated effort to exterminate Terra, to erase humanity from the galaxy under the guise of diplomacy. Cade turned to Rear Admiral Cassian Ward, his voice sharp and commanding. "Get the evidence. Every pod, every weapon, every experiment. Upload it to every unsecured channel in the galaxy. Let them see what the Council has done." Ward nodded, his expression grim as he signaled his tech team. Within moments, the chamber was alive with activity, soldiers capturing images and data, uploading files to Terra's network. The truth spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy, every species, every faction. The images were undeniable, the glass pods filled with human test subjects, the weapons designed to target human physiology, the biological experiments crafted with precision cruelty. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as Terra's forces unveiled the truth. The Council's facade of unity and peace crumbled in an instant, replaced by the undeniable reality of betrayal and genocide. Cade stood amidst the chaos, his gaze fixed on the glowing pods, his voice a quiet promise. "They wanted us gone," he murmured, his words carrying the weight of humanity's resilience. "But we're still here. and they'll never forget what they've done. In that moment, Terra wasn't just a victim, it was a force to be reckoned with, a reminder that humanity would endure, no matter the cost. The galaxy had seen the truth, and the Council's betrayal would echo through the stars for generations to come. The footage unleashed a storm. It spread across the galaxy like a plague, infecting every communication channel, every colony, every starship. It was undeniable, unfiltered, and horrifying, a truth that no one could escape. Images of alien scientists cutting into human bodies, their hands steady as they carved through flesh, their faces cold and devoid of pity. Videos of Council officials standing in observation chambers, laughing as human test subjects screamed, their voices raw and broken. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy burned. Neutral factions, once silent and cautious, erupted in fury. Their leaders stepped forward, condemning the Council with words sharp as blades. Treaties were shredded, alliances dissolved. The once mighty web of diplomacy the Council had woven unraveled in days, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Accusations flew like missiles, each one a strike against their crumbling facade. Betrayers, they were called. Monsters. Architects of genocide. But the most chilling response came from the Drullis Collective, a civilization older than Terra itself, known for its cryptic wisdom and devastating power. Their message echoed across the galaxy, transmitted in their deep, resonant tongue, a voice that seemed to vibrate through the bones of anyone who heard it. "You provoke Terra," the message began, slow and deliberate, each word dripping with finality. "Now Terra is erasing your gods." The words hung in the air like a prophecy, their meaning undeniable. The Drullis Collective, known for their neutrality and calculated detachment, had taken a side. And it wasn't the Council's. Across Terra, there was no celebration. No cheers of victory, no relief in the faces of its people. The footage had revealed the depth of the betrayal, and the scars it left ran deep. Humanity wasn't just fighting a war anymore, it was fighting for its very existence. The Council had tried to erase them, to wipe them from the stars like a stain, but Terra refused to be erased. Factories roared to life in every corner of Terra's colonies, their smokestacks belching dark clouds into the sky. Production doubled overnight, the hum of machinery a constant reminder that humanity was preparing for something far greater than survival. Weapons rolled off assembly lines in endless streams, their designs more advanced, more lethal than anything Terra had ever created. Drone fleets expanded, their numbers growing by the thousands. They moved in synchronized formations, their sleek forms a testament to humanity's ingenuity and adaptability. Each drone was armed and ready, their purpose clear, to protect Terra and destroy anything that threatened it. The people of Terra worked tirelessly, their faces grim but determined. Engineers pored over blueprints, their hands steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on them. Soldiers trained harder, their movements sharp and precise, their resolve unshakable. Civilians volunteered in droves, their contributions small but vital, a reminder that humanity's strength lay not just in its weapons, but in its unity. The betrayal had forged Terra into something new, something unyielding. It wasn't just a civilization anymore, it was a force of nature, a storm that refused to be silenced. Humanity wasn't fighting for revenge. It wasn't fighting for justice. It was fighting to erase the mistake of trusting the Council, to ensure that no one would ever dare to betray them again. The galaxy watched as Terra prepared, its factories glowing like embers in the dark, its fleets spreading like shadows across the stars. And in the silence that followed the Drullis Collective's message, one truth became clear: Terra wasn't just surviving. Terra was evolving. The Council had tried to erase humanity, but they had failed. And now, Terra was preparing to erase them. The list was written in cold precision, 5 names etched into the fabric of betrayal like scars on Terra's soul. These were not soldiers who fought on the front lines nor politicians who signed treaties with hollow promises. They were masterminds, the unseen hands that had crafted humanity's extinction with the ease of artists painting their darkest masterpiece. Hidden behind sterile walls and layers of security, they lived lives of luxury, sipping high-end liquor and basking in the glow of their calculated cruelty. Cade held the list in his hand, his grip tight enough to crumple the edges. Each name was a symbol of the horrors unleashed upon Terra, each one a thread in the web of genocide. His team stood around him, weapons ready, their faces grim with the weight of what had to be done. There would be no trials, no speeches, no mercy. Terra didn't have the luxury of forgiveness. The first name on the list was Dr. Alaric Voss, an exobiologist whose genius had been twisted into monstrosity. He was the architect of the genetic weapons that had ravaged Terra's colonies, overseeing trials that turned human bodies into grotesque experiments. His weapons didn't just kill, they deconstructed, unraveling humanity's biology with cruel precision. Cade's team tracked him to a secluded research facility, its walls gleaming with sterile white light, its corridors silent except for the hum of machinery. Voss had contacted Cade beforehand, claiming he wanted to defect. His voice had been calm, almost pleading, but Cade knew better. Men like Voss didn't seek redemption, they sought escape. He doesn't get absolution, Cade said, his voice cold and final as they approached the facility. He gets interrogation. Then he gets buried. They found Voss in his private chamber, surrounded by monitors displaying data from his experiments. He didn't run. Instead, he stood there, his hands raised, his face pale but composed. "I can help you," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "I know things that could save Terra." Cade stepped forward, his pulse rifle aimed directly at Voss's chest. "You knew things that could have saved Terra years ago," he replied, his tone razor sharp. "You chose genocide instead." Voss's pleas fell on deaf ears. He was dragged away, his screams echoing down the sterile halls as Cade's team dismantled the facility, destroying every trace of the horrors he had created. The second name was Lady Serena Kryn, a woman whose cruelty had been masked by opulence. She wasn't a scientist or a strategist, she was a financier, the one who had funded embargoes that starved Terra's colonies, cutting off vital supplies and watching as entire populations withered away. Her wealth had bought her safety, her floating palace drifting above a gas giant, untouchable by ordinary means. Cade's team infiltrated the fortress under cover of darkness, their movements silent and calculated. The palace was a marvel of luxury, its halls adorned with golden arches and crystal chandeliers that refracted light in dazzling patterns. But beneath the beauty lay the stench of corruption, the echoes of lives lost because of her greed. Lady Kryn was found in her private quarters, lounging on a velvet chaise, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't even flinch when Cade's team burst in. Instead, she smirked, her eyes gleaming with disdain. "You think killing me will change anything?" she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "I'm just one piece of the puzzle." Captain Vance, a soldier whose family had been among those starved by Kryn's embargoes, stepped forward without hesitation. He didn't reply. He didn't argue. He simply raised his pistol and fired. The shot echoed through the chamber, sharp and final. Kryn collapsed, her glass shattering on the floor, the wine pooling around her like blood. Her palace was stripped of its riches, its treasures redistributed to Terra's colonies as reparations. As Cade's team departed, the gas giant loomed below them, its swirling storms a reminder of the chaos that had brought them here. They didn't look back. There was no time for reflection, no room for remorse. The list was far from complete, and Terra's vengeance had only just begun. Each name was a step closer to justice or perhaps something darker. Terra wasn't just hunting the architects of genocide. It was dismantling the foundation of betrayal, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but ashes. The betrayal was a wound deeper than any Terra had ever endured. Humanity's enemies had always been alien beasts with strange faces and incomprehensible motives, civilizations that sought to dominate or destroy. But now, the enemy wore familiar faces, spoke in familiar tongues, and carried the same history. Humans had turned against their own, and the pain of it cut sharper than any blade. The third architect, Kale Draven, was a name that echoed infamy. A brilliant strategist who had orchestrated the logistics of Terra's extermination, he had betrayed not just humanity but the very essence of loyalty. Draven was being sheltered by the Titan Accord, a faction of human collaborators who had abandoned Terra in its time of greatest need. They believed that siding with the Council would secure their survival, that betraying their own kind would buy them safety in the storm. Cade's team descended upon Titan like shadows, their arrival swift and silent. Titan, with its thick orange haze and methane rains, was a place of harsh beauty, its surface dotted with human outposts that clung to life in the unforgiving environment. The Titan Accord had made one of these outposts their stronghold, fortifying it with stolen Terra tech and guarded by soldiers who once wore the same insignia as Cade's team. Inside the stronghold, the air was tense. The collaborators knew Terra would come for them, but they had underestimated the fury that drove Cade's team. They breached the gates with precision, their movements honed by years of war. The corridors were lined with propaganda posters bearing the Council's emblem, promises of prosperity and peace for those who submitted. Cade tore one from the wall as they passed, crumpling it in his fist. In the heart of the stronghold, they found Kale Draven. He sat in a dimly lit chamber, his face gaunt but defiant, his eyes gleaming with the arrogance of a man who believed he had outsmarted everyone around him. He didn't speak as Cade entered, but his expression said everything. He was unrepentant. Before Cade could act, the leader of the Titan Accord stepped forward, a former Terra Navy officer named Commander Elias Rourke. Rourke's uniform was a twisted mockery of what it once represented, altered to bear the insignia of the Council. His face was lined with age and regret, but his posture was firm, his voice steady. "You don't understand," Rourke began, his tone almost pleading. "We did this to survive. Terra was doomed, and the Council offered us a chance to save what was left." Cade's gaze was icy, his grip tightening on his weapon. "You didn't like justice when it included you," he said, his voice cutting through Rourke's excuses like a blade. Rourke faltered, his words dying on his tongue. He looked at Cade, searching for some sign of forgiveness, but found none. There was no room for mercy here. The betrayal was too deep, the cost too high. Draven tried to speak then, his voice smooth and calculated, but Cade silenced him with a single gesture. "You don't get to justify genocide," Cade said, his tone low and dangerous. "You don't get to explain betrayal." The Titan Accord fell that day. Cade's team dismantled the faction piece by piece, their operations exposed, their stronghold reduced to rubble. Rourke was dragged away, his protests ignored, his fate sealed. The collaborators who had sided with the Council were given no quarter, their betrayal met with swift justice. As for Draven, he was taken alive not out of mercy, but because his knowledge was too valuable to waste. He would be interrogated, his mind picked apart for every detail, every secret he had kept. And when Terra had no further use for him, he would face the consequences of his actions. The stronghold burned as Cade's team departed, the flames consuming the lies and treachery that had festered within its walls. Titan's skies wept methane rain, the storm swirling above as if mourning the betrayal that had unfolded below. Cade didn't look back. The betrayal had left scars, but Terra couldn't afford to dwell on them. There were still names on the list, still architects to hunt, still justice to deliver. Humanity had been wounded, but it wasn't broken. And as long as Terra stood, betrayal would never go unanswered. The neutron star loomed in the distance, a pulsing beacon of cosmic fury. Its light cut through the void like an eternal heartbeat, casting the Council's deep vault in an eerie glow. This was where the Warden, the last architect of Terra's genocide, had chosen to hide. The vault itself was a monolithic structure, carved into the bedrock of a desolate moon orbiting the star. It was a fortress of silence, its walls designed to withstand the crushing forces of gravity and time. Cade's team approached the vault with grim determination. Every step felt heavier, not because of the moon's gravity, but because of the weight of what lay ahead. The Warden wasn't just another name on the list. He was the final piece, the last thread tying Terra's destruction to the Council's grand design. The vault's entrance hissed open, revealing a sterile corridor that stretched into darkness. The air was cold, biting at their skin as they moved forward. The walls were smooth, almost unnatural, as if they had been grown rather than built. Lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with every step. At the heart of the vault, they found the chamber, a vast, circular room bathed in pale, artificial light. It was empty except for a single figure standing in the center. The Warden. He was humanoid, but there was something alien about him, something unsettling. His body was wrapped in a shimmering interface suit, its surface alive with streams of data that danced like liquid light. His face was obscured by a mask, but his voice was clear and sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've come all this way," he said, his tone calm, almost curious. "To kill me, I assume." Cade stepped forward, his weapon drawn, but he didn't fire. "Not yet." "You betrayed Terra," he said, his voice steady, though anger simmered beneath the surface. "You designed its extinction." The Warden tilted his head, as if studying Cade. "I protected the galaxy," he replied. "Terra was a threat, a species that didn't conquer planets, but consumed them. You take, and take, and take, until there's nothing left. I saw it happen once. I couldn't let it happen again." Cade's team exchanged glances, the tension in the room palpable. The Warden's words were laced with conviction, but they rang hollow in the face of the horrors he had unleashed. "You were one of us," Cade said, his voice quieter now, but no less fierce. "A Gen 1 colonist. You helped build Terra. And then you destroyed it." The Warden's suit shimmered, the streams of data intensifying as if responding to his emotions. "I didn't destroy Terra," he said. "I saved the galaxy from it. You see yourselves as victims, but you're blind to the truth. Humanity is a plague, a force that cannot be contained. I made the hard choice, the necessary choice." Cade didn't argue. He didn't have the words or the desire to debate with a man who had betrayed his own species. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze locked on the Warden. "You don't get to decide who lives and who dies," Cade said, his voice cold and final. The Warden didn't flinch. He simply stood there, his shimmering suit glowing brighter as the chamber's systems came to life. Screens flickered on the walls, displaying streams of data coordinates, algorithms, protocols. At the center of it all was a single command, the fail-safe protocol. The Warden's ultimate design. A program that would wipe Terra from existence, erasing every trace of humanity from the galaxy. Cade's team moved quickly, their hands flying across the consoles as they fought to dismantle the protocol. The Warden didn't resist. He simply watched, his posture calm, his gaze unwavering. You think you're saving Terra, he said, his voice soft now, almost pitying. But you're only delaying the inevitable. Humanity will destroy itself, with or without me. Cade ignored him. His focus was on the purge button, the final command that would erase the fail-safe protocol forever. His finger hovered over it for a moment, then pressed down. The chamber shuddered as the protocol was purged, the screens flickering and going dark. The streams of data on the warden's suit faltered, then faded entirely. Cade raised his pistol. The warden didn't move. He didn't plead, didn't beg for his life. He simply stood there, his mask hiding whatever expression might have crossed his face. You're wrong, Cade said, his voice barely above a whisper. Humanity isn't perfect. But we fight for our survival. We fight for each other. That's what makes us human. The shot rang out, sharp and final. The warden's body crumpled to the floor, the shimmering suit dimming as his life faded. The chamber was silent now, the only sound the faint hum of the neutron star beyond the vault. Cade lowered his weapon, his gaze lingering on the lifeless figure before him. It was done. The architects of genocide had fallen, their designs dismantled, their betrayals answered. Terra had survived, but the scars of the war would remain. As Cade's team left the vault, the neutron star pulsed behind them, its light a reminder of the fragile balance between destruction and survival. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, but it had endured. And as long as Terra stood, it would continue to fight not just for survival, but for the right to exist. The war was over, but there were no parades, no songs of victory. Terra didn't celebrate. It couldn't. The wounds were too fresh, the scars too raw. The galaxy still watched, its gaze heavy with fear and uncertainty, and Terra welcomed it. Fear was a shield now, a necessary barrier between humanity and those who had sought to eradicate it. Cade stood atop a ruined spire overlooking the city edge, the jagged remains of a building that had once symbolized hope and progress. Now it was nothing more than a skeleton of steel and stone, a silent witness to the devastation that had swept across the planet. The air was still, heavy with the scent of ash and dust, though the fires had long since burned out. Above him, the stars stretched across the heavens, their light cold and distant. They seemed smaller now, dimmer not because they had changed, but because humanity had risen to meet them. Terra was no longer a fragile world clinging to survival in the vastness of space. It was something more, something stronger. They'll come again, Vance said, his voice breaking the silence. He stood a few steps behind Cade, his armor scratched and battered, his face lined with exhaustion. There was no triumph in his tone, only a quiet certainty. Yes, Cade replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But next time, they won't come for peace. The stars seemed to flicker as he spoke, as if the universe itself was listening. They'll come to beg, Cade continued, his voice steady, resolute. Vance didn't respond. He didn't need to. The words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of what was to come. Below them, the city stretched out like a patchwork of ruin and resilience. Buildings lay in shattered heaps, their foundations cracked and broken, but amidst the destruction, life stirred. People moved through the streets, rebuilding, reclaiming what had been lost. Children played in the shadows of fallen towers, their laughter a fragile but defiant sound. Terra was scarred, but it was alive. And it was ready. Cade turned away from the stars, his gaze falling to the city below. The ruins were a reminder of the price humanity had paid, but they were also a testament to its strength. Terra had endured the unthinkable, had faced extinction and fought back. It had been broken, but not defeated. They'll come to beg, Cade repeated, more to himself now than to Vance. And when they did, Terra would be waiting. It wouldn't cower, wouldn't plead for mercy. It would stand tall, unyielding, a force that could no longer be ignored. The galaxy feared Terra, and Terra liked it that way. Fear was power, and power was survival. As the stars flickered above and the city stirred below, Cade felt the weight of what lay ahead. The war was over, but the fight was far from finished. Humanity had risen to meet the stars, and now it would rise even higher. Terra would be ready. Always.